Good evening. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna.
And I'm Rebecca.
And it is Friday night cocktail night, although it does not feel like Friday. Rebecca, does it feel like Friday?
No, in fact, all today I kept thinking, what day is it? I've eaten too much cheese. It's that kind of thing.
It's so crazy when you have Thursday and Friday. It's absolutely crazy. Happy post Thanksgiving. It is great to have you back. Becky, great to see you. Happy evening. You hope everyone had a nice holiday indeed, and you are excited for the show. You just read Rebecca's book, and she's saying that it's awesome. Rebecca, can you see the comments?
So, no.
I'll read them to you.
Okay.
Becky's one of the many people who already. Becky, are you in the book club? Is that why you were able to get the book so quickly? That must be it, right? You've got everybody who's read the book so far has had glowing reviews, and I'm going to welcome everyone who comes onto camera before we get started. But I just want to say that tonight I am here with Rebecca Martin of Storyteller Wool, one of my very close buddies, and we are looking at Rebecca's brand new book that has gone out to book club members at Rug Cooking Magazine, Embry Press, and otherwise you have, I'm going to say it 100 times during the episode, but you have a bunch of these stocked in your Etsy store, which is Storyteller Wool.
Yes.
So it is not out right now, but you have some. You stocked it in your Etsy store, Storyteller Wool. And if you are in the Rug Cooking Magazine book club, then you have already received yours and you have already been enjoying it. So we will return to that in just a minute. Melissa, great to see you. Cheers, my dears, with your rum and Coke. Happy weekend, my love. And Mom, you are on too. Happy Friday night. So excited for the show. Had a wonderful Thanksgiving. It was wonderful. Glad to be here with Deanna and Rebecca. My buddy, Anne, she's your buddy too, because she loves your book. Yeah. Hi from New Hampshire, in my jammies and ready to listen to a great presentation. Anne has already gotten your book, and she liked it very much. Sharon Waddell, great to see you from sunny, cold Vancouver. Happy Friday night. Cheers, my dears. Joyce in Pennsylvania, happy Friday night, Cats Gallery. Greetings from overcast and cool Southern California. Gail is logging out from Australia. Happy morning, happy coffee time to you. Becky says, yes, she got it from the book club. And says, the book is so awesome, Rebecca. And Kirsten says, cheers, my dears. So let me get a sip and let's get into it as more people join us, I'm sure. All right, well, at least I have somebody to share the space with tonight, and I can occasionally have a sip or stop running my mouth and let Rebecca do some of the heavy lifting. So I am very happy that I was able to receive this book in advance, right? So I've been looking at this. Rebecca has her copy on her lap. I know those of you who already have the book are maybe looking at it. This is what the book looks like. So first question, why did you name this book Rug Hooking in Harmony?
That is a good question.
Maybe I should have told you I was going to ask you that.
No, the reason for that is I'm very passionate about combining techniques and how they work together. And I actually don't write about this in the book, but when I met my husband, he was part of a barbershop quartet. And hearing the different voices and how they came together and would actually even create different notes than they were singing when they would combine. That's how I felt. The more I combined stuff, the different techniques, punch and Proddy and standing wool, I felt it was coming together to create this harmony that wasn't there on its own.
Yeah, this has always been a big thing since I've known you, is you love to pool techniques. You love different techniques, putting them together in the same piece. Just the idea of sampler pieces, in my mind, that is kind of you. That's what you do. You're the person who does that better than anyone. So it's interesting to note that this book is filled with different techniques, and we're going to be looking at that sort of angle. We're going to be looking at the projects in the book and talking about the many techniques that are in here, because a lot of people associate you with punch needle, and right. Certainly you are at the front of the punch needle world, but you do so many other things.
And punch needle was the first form of rug hooking that I learned, and then I pretty quickly followed that with traditional and right about the same time standing wool. But actually I had been playing around with both standing wool and actually my daughter had done some Proddy without us even knowing the names of it. Mm-hmm. So in some ways that predated everything. But yeah, it was one of those things that as I began to learn more, I wanted to learn every technique I saw. And then as I would teach, I kept seeing that with my students. they would see something in one of my example pieces, and they would say, oh, what's that? And I said, oh, that's a Quilly. And then they said, oh, well, then teach us a class on Quillies. And it just kept snowballing. And I realized a lot of people are wanting to combine techniques.
Yeah.
And so actually when I was approached to write the book, I was asked to write an advanced punch needle book. And I politely said, no, that's not what I didn't want to do that. So
I think that was a good move for you because you get pigeonholed, when you are headed, you're headed in one direction, you become known for that one thing. There is a lot to be said for that. But in your case, you are so passionate about so many different things. Yeah. And, for me, the thing that I love about this book, for me, sometimes when I see some of the other forms of rug making, like standing wool, like Proddy, I sometimes feel like there is and this is an awful thing to say out loud, but a corny factor, right? There's like a taste problem where it's just a lot. And sometimes it doesn't, the context for me isn't there. And I think it's cool to see so much of it at once, but for me, it's not cohesive, right? It's not, it's not helping the piece. Whereas somehow with your pieces, all of the different designs that you do, and we're going to look at examples of it, you use these different techniques for rug making in a way that it makes literal sense, right? And it has a lot of class. The context for me is what grounds the piece and keeps it looking classy as opposed to very crafty. Do you know what I mean?
Right. And I'm not a believer in just sort of throwing everything at it because you can.
Yeah.
It's more looking at a pattern. My goal was when people finish reading this book and we go to sit down to work on a pattern that either they drew or somebody else drew, they'll look at it and instead of thinking, I'm going to punch that or I'm going to hook that, they think, wow, a Proddy section right there would be perfect. And then I'll hook around that. And, I think I want the background to be punch needle. They'll just think in a broader way and not necessarily, oh, I have all these skills, so I'm just going to throw them in there. They would do it as it made sense.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing, isn't it? Because, it is great to have many tricks in your bag of tricks. But it is a question of, in terms of the success of the piece, it is a question of restraint and when to use what.
Right.
Making good choices.
Overdo it.
You don't want to overdo it, but you do want to be a bit, you want to be creative and you want to be a bit of a maverick with all of the things that are in your head. You want to get them down. And that is a very fine balance. But sometimes, and we've said this a lot between ourselves, that there is such a big sort of gap among rug makers, between the people who are very, very creative and not super technical like me, and for people you are much more technical than me, you are also super creative. You're a bit more balanced than I am with those two things. But I think that the person who's approaching the craft or approaching any project, I think would be more or less attracted to adding more styles depending on how technical they are. I feel like technical people are more likely to want to acquire more feathers in their cap in a weird way. But yeah. And let me just catch you up on comments because Anne wrote and said, tell Rebecca as we speak, I am in the Quilly mode on to number 12. Does that make sense, huh?
Yeah.
That sounds great, Anne. That sounds exciting. But mode number 12 sounds good. Let me just, is that a chapter? I don't want to miss out on anything good here. I saw the Quilly chapter and it's like over the top fantastic. We're going to look at all that together. Veronica logged on from Southern California. It's great to see you. Happy Friday night. And Dave Lake logged on from Toronto. Greetings, kitchen sink burritos. I didn't know there was such a thing. That sounds fantastic. And hard cider for cocktail night. And Ryan, my love, you logged on from a Friday night from Texas, and you are having peanut butter dark chocolate stout. Oh, that sounds fantastic. All the buddies are logging on. So let's get to it. I'm gonna crack open the book, but first I'm gonna admire the cover, which is absolutely beautiful. This is a pattern that repeats in the book. You're showing this in multiples on the cover because I guess you're making the point that one image can be done in countless different ways.
Yeah, I wanted to have the same image reappear in each of the first 4 chapters so I could walk everyone through it in punch, in traditional rug hooking, as a complete standing wool piece, which I very rarely do a complete standing wool piece, but I wanted to show it. And actually the one in the top corner is the combined one. The Proddy one didn't make the cover, but it's in the book.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Back of the book is beautiful too. I mean, you can see she's gorgeous. She's right here. And your bee. It's just a absolutely beautiful book. I'm going to crack it open and look at the first pages. So first piece that's showing up here is like one of my favorite pieces that you've done. Let me hold it up here. And for those of you who are just joining us, this is the first time that we have done a split screen. And I'm going to assume, since nobody said otherwise, that it is indeed working. I'm hoping that it is working.
Yeah. Ask them, are we centered or are they seeing us to the side?
That's a great question. We've been agonizing over this point. Are you seeing us like together side by side? Or are you seeing like my dirty bathrobe in the corner and parts of the set that you should not be seeing? That's what we're wondering. We were struggling with that because this is the first side by side, Ryan says. So does it look right, Ryan? Does it look right? Are we like equal side by side? I just want to be sure because we would love to be able to do this all the time. I am in Connecticut, as many of you know, and I think a lot of you also know that Rebecca is in Colorado. So we are nowhere near each other and split side to side. Okay, great. It seems like it worked the way that we hoped that it would work. So far, so good. Tell us if anything is wrong because we also need feedback with the maiden voyage. I think it was important to do the maiden voyage here. And this isn't our first show together, but last time we were sitting side by side at a table. So that was a lot easier. Perfect. Everyone says it looks perfect. That's great. So Burnham Flowers, 16 by 16. This is a Jane McGowan design. This is one that you did for your McGowan certification, I think, right? And so sold by Honey Beehive. And again, this is like one of my favorite pieces that you did. Is this one of the pieces? Because I remember when you did this, it was a couple of years ago, right?
So I did it this last year.
Oh, this is from this last year.
And so how that one came about is I was asked to teach and I hooked it the way they wanted me to hook it. And I think did I show it or I might not have shown it on the other show?
I feel like you didn't show it when we had it. That made me, I feel like I saw it, but you might not have wanted to show it because it was about to appear at the McGowan.
So the assignment was that pattern and then to use dip dyes. So I hooked it how it was sort of expected to be hooked. And I loved it. And it sat on the couch. And every time I walked by it, I thought, well, that's lovely, but that's not me. And so, and I'm busy writing the book. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to hook it a second time. And I'm going to hook it how I want to. And I looked at it and I immediately saw the shaded rose. And I said, no, that should be a Proddy flower. And I love bringing in yarn and sculpting it. So I hooked it a second time where I hooked, punch, Proddy, and there's standing wool in there too.
Yeah.
So it's a good example. It's a great one to start with because that's the whole premise of the book is you can see a pattern a whole new way. Not that the original way I hooked it was deficient in any way.
Yeah.
When I taught it as the classic, and then that one is the creative.
I think it's a point that's worth making because while a lot of people do like these middle 20th century designs, you know, it is a moment in time, and a lot of people like flowers, but they're not inclined to do flowers. And I think when you see examples like this, where we're looking at a classic McGowan, this is Jane McGowan, but still a classic McGowan pattern, it really doesn't have that sort of dated look to me. And believe me, I love old things. You know how much I love old things. I love old things more than new things. But in terms of art, right, it is nice to see something new. And you've done so many new things, particularly the yellow flower for me is so you. Like if this was in a row of 100 pieces, I would definitely know that this was yours because you are pushing the boat out with a lot of changes, and you're not doing it in that excruciatingly realistic middle 20th century, style. You're employing a lot of the styles that you like and the techniques that you like, and it has your personality. So,
and like the veins and the leaves are standing wool.
Yeah, I can see they're done with a needle, right?
Yeah. So it's just a very thick coat weight wool that's on its side.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a strip of it that I sewed down and hooked around it.
And just the color change within the petals is just clever.
I love combining yarn and wool strips. I think just the change in textures makes such a difference in a piece. And the rose, I find rose is really tricky to hook in a classic shaded style.
Yeah.
So turning it into a Proddy rose made it fun and easier.
You know, it makes so much sense. It's so beautiful. And looking at the rose, I don't know a lot about flowers, but I have been studying roses lately because I have some projects coming up in the new year that will involve roses. And, being a not gardening type person, It is a miracle to me to see how so many different roses fall the way that they do, with like folded petals like this, like really tight, dense, folded up petals, and others have very smooth petals that are like perfectly aligned. It just makes me think that if you were going to do a piece, even if it had 20 roses in it, you could use Proddy to make them each different, because it makes a lot of literal sense, to have the flower be in that style, but not to have all of it be in that style. So it's just a great piece. It's like many of your pieces, and you've got beautiful antique black in the background. So for beginners, antique black, and it's maybe hard to tell on my monitor because it is nighttime. It's super, super dark out, but it is not a solid black.
Right.
Yeah, it's
and that's actually two different yarns.
Ooh.
One that's a really deep gray, and then one that I call like a primitive black or an antique black, and then I mixed them.
Oh gosh, it looks so good because it adds interest when it's not all completely one color in the background.
And I love punching backgrounds because I put so much time and energy usually into the main motif, and punching is faster.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have that break at the end.
No, it's absolutely beautiful. It's a beautiful piece. And then we come to the table of contents. For those of you who are looking at the book or looking forward to the book arriving, the table of contents in terms of content goes from traditional rug hooking to punch needle rug hooking to which is punch needle, to standing wool, to Proddy, and then you have two sections on top of that, finding harmony in rug hooking. We're going to come to that, and also next level harmony. So we start off the book with your preface, which is beautiful, and your introduction, which is beautiful. And I want to show you what that looks like. But since Rebecca's with us, and this is the piece from Maine, right, from the summer. This is like the Compass Rose piece.
Yep, I actually have that.
Where the Wind Blows? Is it Where the Wind Blows?
Yes.
Absolutely beautiful. Such a beautiful piece. Now, that's the piece that you taught, or that was the advertisement for the boat trip in Maine?
It was more the inspiration piece on the boat. Everybody created their own pieces.
Yeah. It's an absolutely beautiful piece. We've looked at that, and we've loved that piece because it has the inset Quilly. It's got different styles, and you've whipped the center. Remember this? I know we've seen this, but for people who haven't seen it yet, you whipped the center part, right, around my finger's looking at it backwards, sorry. This part here.
It's a piece of cording, that used for piping in a pillow or a sofa. And then I took a punch needle and jumped over it.
Okay. So did you secure it down first, or you just laid it where it be?
I sort of tacked it down.
Yeah, that's smart.
I sewed it down.
That's an amazing technique. Absolutely amazing. And then in the introduction, you go right to the set of 4, which are so beautiful. And you have some of those on your lap.
Yes. Yes. So I can show each one. Can't tell what you can see.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah.
So, and to be honest, when I was working on these, I was not envisioning them on the cover, and I was playing around with different palettes and trying to keep myself from always using the same colors. So when the editor was like, "Oh, I want them all on the cover," I was like, "Yeah, but I didn't plan for that color-wise for them to all be together." But it's still.
I know you are very technical, so it matters a lot that things look right. But this absolutely looks right. The fact that, yes, the colors are different. It has that Andy Warhol mystique, right? Because each one is the same. The colors are different, but because the pattern is the same, it holds together remarkably well. Susie, good to see you. Happy Friday. Absolutely beautiful. So when you sat down to write the book, did you start by writing the introduction?
No, that was pretty late in the game. Mm-hmm. I mean, I knew it in my head. But what I really needed to do was get into the meat of it myself. And so I had to create the 4 pieces and then the 5th piece that combined them. And I was probably 3/4 of the way through writing when I sat down to write the introduction.
Yeah. I think it was really smart for you to say, I don't want to do a book that's just on punch. I think that was really a good move.
Well, and I want to add to that. One of the reasons I said no was, I guess it was 2 years ago, or was it in 21, that a beautiful book came out from Rug Hooking Magazine by Simone. It has a blue cover and a gorgeous punch rug. And the main reason I said no to doing an advanced punch needle book is her book had it all. It already had anything I would have added. it's such a comprehensive and excellent book. I felt that they would be redundant. And I also, wanted to go in this other direction, but I really felt Simone's book. So if you haven't picked that one up, it's an excellent book.
It's a great book. And I know what you mean. It's like when you hear someone record a song and they record it exactly the same way, you say, why did you bother? It's absolutely redundant. So I think, and I remember I was with you in the early stages when you decided to do this book, and you were kind of trying to decide on what the direction of it would be, what the sort of the overarching thrust of it would be. And it took you a while, but it was remarkably a short time, all things considered. I mean, you seem to synthesize your thoughts pretty quickly, and you seem to make a series of yes/no decisions very early in the game with the way you wanted this book to go. And you finished the book early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just touch early.
You had a vision, and it was incredible. You were very, very focused. So, for example, do you have the all Proddy one on your lap? Yeah. Because that one, they're all beautiful. I want to see all of them if it's possible. Just a little bit over to your right. Yep. Yep. More to the right. Yep. Perfect. Yeah. That's a gorgeous piece, because you've done shaped Proddy and you've done like the clippy, just the
Yeah. So the background is just rectangles, and then the flower is a bunch of different sizes.
Yep.
And then it's like mirror image, and then these are different sizes.
Yeah.
And I tend to use Proddy as an accent in my work. In fact, this is the only all Proddy piece I've ever done. And I have some in the hopper that I would like to do, but I primarily view it as an accent. But I also wanted to show how the pattern would transform if done completely in one technique versus the other.
Yeah. Now, for somebody, because I know that you are a very neat worker, for someone who works as neatly as you and is as precise as you, was it chaotic and staticky to do an all Proddy piece?
Yes. It's like I don't have any shag carpet in my house. I like things a little more slick. But there was something about it that intrigued me, and that very soon after completing it, I had this vision for a rug for my bathroom that I wanted to do in all using t-shirt material and Proddy.
With that piece that you're holding, one of the things about Proddy that I think is super beautiful and meaningful is but not the shaped parts, but the clippy parts that fill the background. When you pull those up, and one of them is alongside another one of a different color, you can't really control. You know what I mean? It's like a bunch of little sprinkles fell out of the top, broke off the sprinkles, and they fell all over the table, and they're kind of overlapping each other with these small lines. To me, that is my favorite part of Proddy, because you can't control it and you can't account for it.
Well, and the different results you get from a lighter weight fabric versus a thicker one, that intrigued me, and I view it as a very sort of more old-fashioned looking, but it can read very contemporary depending on how it's done.
That is very it looks like you. It still looks like you, even though it's a Proddy piece. It is unexpected, but it still looks like you. So you start the book off with the traditional rug hooking chapter, which is a really informative chapter. You talk about hooks, you give tips, you talk about the cutter, right? Your favorite tools.
I lead through 2 different ways to hold the hook, because it was pretty late in the game that I realized how I hold the wool strip is apparently different than a lot of people. But it really, really works for my brain. And I have since learned that I'm not the only one who does this. I can't remember how I was taught, but I go through both ways of holding it. The more common one, where you're holding the wool strip kind of pinched, and then how I hold it is I hold it like this.
Okay. Yeah, like you're smoking a cigarette with a pearl holder. Yeah.
I hold it with a piece of yarn, but so let's see, where can I hold it where you can see it best? So I'm holding, so it's always absolutely flat. And then the hook comes along and grabs it, and then I just readjust. So I hook a little slower than when you're I'm putting it as my skin suit. When you hold it more like this and it comes along and kind of drags across your thumb and pulls it up, that's faster. But it's a control thing. Like I really like the cigarette.
You like the cigarette hold. And, you know, and then you're guaranteed it's going to come up the way that you mean for it to come up and not.
Yes, towards the side of the wool that I want to come up. It's guaranteed that way.
Yeah. It's good to show more than one way. I think it's absolutely fatal when people are taught something one way, because there's never one way to do anything in this world.
Right.
I can think of one thing.
It's a brain thing, because I originally would only teach the way I do it. And I had a student, we worked for like 2 hours straight, and it was not clicking. And so then I said, well, you know, a lot of other people do it this way. And then I left, and then I got a text an hour later, and she's like, I got it. And it was the other way. So for her brain, she needed to be taught the other way. So I thought that was interesting. One way does not fit all.
No, one way does not fit all, not at all. So there is such a good blend of advice in here and tips. You give so much good sort of black and white information that one needs, like the width of strips, things like this. You know, there are features in here that are just as is wool, over dyed wool, things that you would need to know as a beginner. But then you do have a ton of patterns and projects, so it evolves rather quickly. But
and my goal was that someone could pick this up that had no experience with hooking or punching. Yeah. So for some people, a lot of this there'd be elements of this that's review.
Yeah.
But I wanted it to be accessible to everyone if they had never picked up a hook or a punch.
Yeah. I think that's the right way. It seems to me and we talk about this personally all the time, within our craft, there's a lot of problems. The way that it's been presented over the years, the way it's been very black and white, very rigid. And when I think about the way that this craft has been presented, like, you do it this way, you know, you hold your hand like this and you do it this way. And I think, like, when you get a cooking book, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't tell you, like, what kind of canister to put the flour in. It doesn't treat you the same way as historically this craft has. And it's very recent that we start seeing people do things and in different ways, use different tools, use non-traditional tools. Yeah. And talk about the different ways they do stuff without being nervous that someone is going to get right down on them, you know?
My favorite part of the whole book is the standing wool chapter. And at the end of that chapter, I talk about an artist that I met. And she didn't know the rules. She was just creating. And you'll have to read it, but it's very special. Because to me, it's the example of sort of why I get up in the morning, is that we're called to create. We should make things. And often when we don't know the rules, we come up with stuff that needs to become, grammar's gone. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? That because she didn't even know what she was doing was called standing wool.
Is this Amy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the main thing with her pieces is this, you can see the stitching. Now, in standing wool, traditionally, the stitching is meant to secure it, and you would never see the stitches. But she incorporated that because her work was so large, she was using it for stability and then as an accent. And if someone had sat her down and said, this is the way standing wool is done, and, you know, keep your stitches really small so they sink in and disappear, you would lose this incredible beauty that she's created by showing these stitches.
Yeah. I mean, if she didn't know what she was doing when she started working on it, that's folk art, isn't it? I mean, that's the very definition of folk art. And, you know, we tend to out-train our natural instincts by taking lots of classes. And some people need that as kind of a backbone to feel confident enough to keep going. But other people don't realize how much your own instincts and your own style is being overwritten as you sit there. You don't even know that it's happening to you. And, you know, it is nice to hear these kinds of stories with happy endings where people are figuring it out on their own as they would have in the 19th century.
Right. And they come up with something brand new and something we all needed to see.
Absolutely. Style-wise and technique-wise, too, coming up with different ways. You just don't think of different ways when you already know how to do something. You hardly ever second-guess yourself with anything.
Well, it was like when we were talking about the Rhea fabric. Yeah. I wasn't wrong. Rhea fabric the other day. And we were talking about, hey, could we hook in it in those empty spaces? And I love that. Like, always looking at different materials and let's experiment and see if they'll work or not.
Yeah. Until you know, and and you know, it's like a catch-22, because it's like when we talk about like, oh, let's try hooking into raya fabric, or let's grab a sweater, you know, a Fair Isle that isn't going to be great to hook with, and let's hook into that as the backing fabric instead. And then you could hook it to, and someone maybe who's approaching the craft as a beginner follows these conversations and says, now I'm completely confused, right? I'm like spoiled for choices, and now I'm completely confused. So sometimes I think that like attack can derail a beginner because it becomes overwhelming. But other people, it really depends on the person, does it?
Yeah.
Other people would be like, oh, I have a sweater like that, I'm going to try it like literally right now.
Yeah.
So it just depends on the person. But you really hope, as a teacher and as someone who loves the craft, as we both do, you really hope that people will hear their way and figure it out. Yeah. You know, because otherwise the craft has no future at all. More comments. Let's catch up a little bit. We said hi to Susie, and Linda, you logged on. We did not say hi. Good to see you. Happy Friday night. And Ann said, I think this book is great because it's also extremely useful for an inexperienced hooker or puncher, due to all of the fun techniques and the ideas to incorporate into our designs. Yeah, right. I think that's absolutely.
That's what I really, really wanted was.
Do you want me to take a photograph of that for like you know, you need a review. And by the way, as these books come out, right? Rebecca has a stash of them now, but they are not officially out at this moment. As they come out, if you are buying the book from Rebecca, great. If you are buying it somewhere else, great. But do try to leave reviews for the books where you buy them so that other people can see, right? This is a thing. For people who write books, it's nice to get good reviews that are not done by a crazy robot that make no sense and give you 1 star. So try to chase up on books that you really love and leave good reviews for them, because that is important to the author, to get that good feedback and not be totally brought to your knees by crazy reviews. And Bridget locked on. Hi, Rebecca from Longmont, Colorado. Do you know Bridget?
Yes, she's one of my students.
Otherwise, that's a coincidence.
Yes, no. Very creative Bridget who loves gnomes and all things fiber. Yeah.
I feel that, Bridget. I feel that. And Linda agrees. Linda logged on earlier. Linda Barney logged on earlier. And Linda, you have the book as well, right? You've seen the book already, and you've been enjoying that too. So you go through at the beginning some of these basic things that matter a lot for a beginner. But like anything else, even if you're not a beginner, it is kind of nice to look at the way that you do things, because it's going to be different than the way I do things. And then isn't it good to second guess yourself once in a while? I mean, isn't that good? Isn't it the worst thing in the world? Who likes a person who is always so sure of themselves that they never wonder or think that there might be other ways, other people, other things to learn, right? Nobody likes that.
I think it's intriguing to read, because I'm a spinner as well, which is just, I mean, it's obviously a very tactile thing. And to read about something that you're doing with your hands, it's just a neat mental exercise to see how it's translated into text.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it certainly was for me to write it. So I'm always intrigued with how-tos, even if I already know how to, but just to see how was this physical task put into text form. And then I think all of us should be teachers at heart. And so reviewing basics, you never know when you're going to be teaching your neighbor, your child, your grandchild. And
it's true. And it's like, absolutely. We should all be trying to do a little bit of outreach and teaching, like for real. But it's like, it's the same as being like in a conference or being at church or being somewhere. And, you know, sometimes the person will say something that means a lot and it clicks and you go, oh my God, that's an aha moment. Yeah. And the next person the next day could say exactly the same words, but it just doesn't click. And that's why it is handy to look at the practical, the technique side of how every artist is working. Because it might be that what I've shown you in my videos, you're like, yeah, I don't get it. I don't get what she means. But you might look at Rebecca and say, aha, I got it. And it's different for each person, right? And it's not a right or wrong thing. It's a click thing. And that can't be measured. It has no shape. It's just different from person to person. So I'm moving forward and I'm looking at your foundation cloths. you usually work on linen, don't you?
Well, it depends on what I'm doing. So for punch, I really like monk's cloth.
Okay.
And we tend to use what we have.
Yeah.
And I'm a big believer in using what you have. And since I almost always have more monk's cloth than linen in the studio, I'm more likely to use monk's cloth on projects where even I probably would prefer linen. I like to hook into linen. I like to punch into monk's cloth. And then Proddy, I lean a little more towards linen because the holes are bigger.
Yeah.
And then with standing wool, if you're doing a whole standing wool piece, you know, it can be put on anything, if you put on wood. So yeah, I do a mix. I have used some rugwork, and in fact, one of these pieces was rugwork. Oh, actually, the traditional one, I put some rugwork.
Okay.
Just because I had it.
And what size cut was that?
This is a mix between a 5 and an 8, which I think is pushing it to do an 8 on rugwork.
Yeah, but it looks fantastic.
Yeah, most of these are monk's cloth.
Yeah. So you're not a big puncher into linen.
Well, no, I do punch into linen.
Okay.
It's just it's easier for me to draw on monk's cloth than it is on linen.
Yeah.
But no, I do, and especially I love leaving the background exposed with linen.
Yeah.
So
that is nice.
If I'm planning on that, then then I'm using linen. And I like using primitive linen because the holes are a little bit bigger.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's nice to know what people like to use, you know, because I don't feel good punching on linen. I never have. It feels brittle to me. It always feels. I don't feel as sure of it as I do. My favorite is rugwork, but my second favorite is monk's cloth.
And there's a lot of traditional hookers. If you suggest hooking on monk's cloth, they like shiver. They do not like that idea. But with like the first one you showed, the Burnham flowers.
Yeah.
I did the first one in linen, and I thought I was going to punch the whole second one. I wasn't sure when I asked for 2 copies of it. I said, "Well, give me one on linen from Honeybee Hive, and then I asked for one on monk's cloth." And a good chunk of that is hooked. Only the background is punched. Well, some of the sculpted yarn areas are punched. And I quickly forgot that I was hooking on monk's cloth. So, you know, you get used to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it is a great technique. So when you're a piece like the Burnham flowers, the reason you're punching the background is for speed.
Yes. And well, I really wanted to have yarn for the background.
Yeah, you like the combo.
And I tend to punch with yarn. Yeah. But I could have hooked it with yarn. But yes, it was just tremendously speedier to punch it.
It's a great thing to use both, right? It's a great thing to just fill in the background, just flip over and fill in the background with a punch. It goes so fast. Different techniques, right? So I'm just flipping through because there are some great techniques here, and I have to say, this pattern, right, this is one of the patterns that we see again and again in the book. Yeah. It's such a great pattern. It's such a balanced composition. Design-wise, it's absolutely fantastic. It's simple, but it's interesting. It's contemporary. It's perfect.
I have a thing about designs exceeding their borders. I don't know why that appeals to me so much, but that shows up a lot in my work.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just love that. Maybe it just sort of symbolizes life or something, that we're not contained and coming out of it.
It's funny because it's like you love old stuff too, but you work in a more contemporary style and you like things that are clean, and weirdly you do break the border a lot, which is kind of an old-fashioned technique, right? Like if you think about Victorian postcards and illuminations from medieval times, everything breaks the border.
So wait, I can't see what I'm doing, but my bee.
The bees, the 2 flowers are breaking the border. They're almost creating a separate border and balance.
I think the eye moves about more, and it feels fresh to me.
It does. There's something interesting about it because it's a personality type too. You know, some people do not like to break the borders, right? Without having a good strong border, it feels unstable for a lot of people's eye, and then other people are like, it feels more creative. I feel gives me sort of more of a feeling of like liberty to be able to break out into the border. It's a personality thing too. I'm sure that Freud could figure it out. If he was here with us, he would be able to figure this out in a split second.
I don't want to be in a box. I want to always be breaking out.
Yeah, I think it is kind of a metaphor for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is great. Now I'm moving on to the next project. That's the next big project in the book, which is this one. And I think Rebecca's going to hold up the OG original over there. This is an extraordinarily pretty piece. This is the ultimate. Yeah, if you hold it, maybe hold it even closer and just move it from, so everybody can see all of the different, even a little bit slower, all of the different techniques, because you've got like the basket weave going on in there.
Yeah.
You've got Waldoboro, that's Waldoboro on top there. This is a great sampler of many techniques, isn't it?
And it's a great way to use up scraps.
Yeah.
And to experiment. One of the things I like to do when I create something is I'm always sort of teaching myself or trying to figure things out. And so it looks like there's many different things going on in here, but like this is values going from light to dark.
Yeah.
And then right here is just going from dark to light.
Yeah.
And depending on what background you have, it can change the look of things. So I like to take a simple shape and then just try different things with it and see what works, what doesn't.
Because you've used a lot of the same colors, but like you're saying, you've used them differently in all of the different cells.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so pretty.
And then I purposely did a gray background. Otherwise, it would look a little candy or, I don't know, a little too...
Yeah, it'd be too much.
Too whimsical.
Yeah.
So the gray, usually, we're taught that to avoid gray because it sucks out color. Well, and I kind of wanted that. I wanted it to tone things down, and using the gray with the bead stitch, again, to have it, but not pull too much attention to it.
And the gray isn't, it's a patterned wool. So it's not like it's a solid gray. It's even, you took it to the next level. It's patterned like a heathery gray with kind of an off-white, like a little, a little bit of a warm white. Super, super pretty. And you've outlined each cell too.
Yes. And forecut. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't like using smaller cuts, but I really do. They're great for outlining.
Yeah. It is really great. Now, can you show us like a close up of the Waldoboro to start? I want to look at a couple of things on this sampler because the Waldoboro is it's still the pink and the white colors. Do you see? Let me see a little bit closer in, and a little bit more to your right.
This way?
Yeah, that's it right there. That's the money shot. Yeah, so you can see all the little dots of color. Is this a number 4 cut too?
Yes. Well, actually, it's a 3. Oh. So this is going to be my little plug for join your local guild.
Yeah.
So at my ATHA guild, it was actually a woman in Arizona. She had passed away, and her grandson drove up all of her rug hooking supplies to us. And we were able to use some in the silent auction for when we hosted the ATHA biennial in Denver. But then he kept coming, and like another year, he literally had trash bags full of 3 cuts and 4 cuts, meticulously stored, sometimes even with the dye recipe still attached to them. Mm. And there were only 2 of us in the whole group that showed any interest in them. And I went home with bags of this. And most people said, well, I don't hook with a small cut. Well, you can take, and in fact, with this one I did, I grabbed 3 or 4 of them at a time. So it's no longer a fine cut because I've got a bunch of them, and I pulled them up really high. And then I sculpted them. So don't pass up something because you think, oh, I'm not a fine hooker. You can combine them, and then it's like a medium cut.
Just like if you're hooking with a sock yarn or a fingering yarn or something really lightweight, you're going to do more than one ply. Right? It doesn't make any sense to pull one hair up.
Yeah, and the punch needle, same thing. You could have a yarn that's too thin, and you might pass it by. Well, you could take 4 lengths of it and thread it through the punch needle, and it might be a little finicky, but you can still make it work.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you can make anything work. Where there's a will, there's a way, right?
Yeah.
But also, there is something so grateful and what's the word? Just the fact that you would honor that person's supplies, right? There's something really meaningful about that.
In fact, I did an entire piece I created this sort of the project for myself of I wanted to do the entire piece with only her leftovers, no new work. Nice. And I didn't cut anything. And so it really limited my palette, but it was a Japanese scroll that I was doing. So it was pretty monochromatic anyways. but I kept thinking, she's no longer with us.
Yeah.
And here is a younger hooker coming up, and all that dyeing she had done, all that saving of her leftovers, and it had a new life.
Yeah.
I just love that. And I'm not that organized. My descendants won't necessarily get trash bags full of organized leftovers, but
Well, I have to say,
I'll use other people's.
the set immediately behind you suggests something. It suggests a different story. You are super organized. It's broken down perfectly by color. But I know what you mean. It's just like so heartbreaking to see things go to waste, because someone else's old equipment and half-done project represents like the hope, the idea that their intention was to see it through, and then they weren't able to. So it is always nice to take that stuff and run with it.
Well, and with this piece, often if you've been hooking and punching for a while, you'll accumulate a lot of leftovers. And we could look into the bin and see a multitude of cuts and colors and think there's no way they could come together. But if you take a simple shape and repeat it, you'd be amazed. Like I have everything from a 3 all the way up to an 8 in here.
Yep. And I love, see if you can hold up one of the squares. I love it when you use in the squares as a border, like a little bit of standing wool. You have the clippies kind of sticking.
Oh,
yeah.
You mean right?
Yeah. Yep, that's one of the examples.
So what that is sometimes we have our leftovers and they're a wider cut than we need. Mm-hmm. So I hook it on its side and then cut it. And so it looks like it could be a 3 or 4 cut, but it was actually possibly even an 8 that's hooked on its side.
It's so smart to use that as like an outline, like a bordering device. That's really smart because it looks completely different. And you love texture, right? So that must, because you love the wool with the yarn, I can see how you'd also love to see lines that you're seeing like the inside of the wool. That is really interesting. It's lots of different techniques. And then this pattern, which when you see the pattern, it's like, what can you do with that? But you can do this with that. You can do infinite amounts of things with that. Yeah. This is like, this kind of hive pattern is absolutely ideal. And a bit of an optical illusion, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, it's just a great idea to be able to go in there and try some different techniques with that. And then you have a pattern key where you're showing where you do the tunneling, where you do the basket weave, where you do the shearing / hoving, all of these different techniques that are talked about at length in the book. Real good breakdown of each of the cells and telling you what is that. Right? Whether you're a beginner or not, you might not have done some of these techniques before. What is that? How can I do that? Because you know that you can do it with the supplies that you already have, right? So that's the good news. The second part is you just have to figure out how to do it. And this book is going to tell you how to do tons of different techniques. Oh, it's a good chapter. And then you're showing a couple of pieces framed out. I love how you do such nice, clean framing on your pieces too. It's really good.
Well, and that's, I think, often a struggle. What do we do with smaller pieces? And sometimes when we're taking a class, often the piece is smaller. Yeah. And I love putting them on wooden boards.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's so perfect. Yeah, it's just nice to see them around. They brighten everything up. And you've got some really lovely examples from other people as well. Yes, right? I want to talk about your work today, but you've done a nice sort of curation of other people's work that fit into the conversation that you're having at that point in each chapter about
and
different.
What's fun is probably 90%, if not more, these are all people I know. Yeah. So it's very special to me. It's like a photo album of my friends.
Yeah. That is the best. It's like a high school scrapbook or something when your friends have stuff in it. It's way more meaningful because we both know it's not, I mean, I'm not going to say it's not fun to write a book, but the part that is fun is kind of synthesizing it, putting it together, and it does feel really good to put in work of people who you really care about. That is part of the joy.
We have our own style and preferred palette, and in fact, you were the one who really encouraged me. You said you have to have other people's work in the book. It'll make it a much richer book.
And you're never going to finish it otherwise. It would you'd be like growing roots in the floor under the computer table. Yeah, I mean, it's good. It's good to have different perspectives too, right?
Yes.
It's good to see other people's work, particularly if you're making a point about a specific technique or something. It's like you want to look at other people's work and say, see what I mean? This is what this person did,
Yeah.
right? It's not just me. I'm not magic. Other people can do this too. So it's good to have that kind of support. But you've made some really good choices in the book about what you've added that, other people's designs and other people's work. The punch needle rug hooking chapter, I struggle with the wording of that because it just seems like it just should be punch needle.
I know.
Punch needle rug hooking for me doesn't make sense because if we're talking about a hook, we're talking about a hook, and this is not you, right? This is editing, right? And I've been going off on this too because, of course, I write books also, and there's sometimes you get somebody overwrites what you wrote. But punch needle, to be very clear for beginners, punch needle is a different tool than a hook. If you're hooking, you're holding a hook. If you're punching, you're holding a punch. But I think maybe the phrase punch needle rug hooking is becoming more popular, or it's somebody is trying to change the language somewhere so that we use them all in one long garbled phrase. I don't think it's super helpful.
I think part of it is since there's punch needle embroidery, it needed to differentiate.
I see.
And also, the punch needle does use the exact same stitch as we use in traditional rug hooking.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's where they needed to put rug hooking onto it because it was the same stitch, even though you're using a punch instead of a hook.
Language is a real big problem within this craft. I mean, I can't see an end to it in this generation. It's tough. We can't seem to find the right language to make it appealing, interesting, but also immediately descriptive to someone coming new to the craft. And there seems to be a confusion of language from generation to generation. We keep shifting what we say in hopes of coming up with something that's a little bit better. I don't know. I don't know.
I rarely ever make an actual rug. Mm-hmm. So I've always chafed against the rug part, because, in fact, my children, the first time I put one of my rugs on the floor, they wouldn't walk on it. Because they had never seen any of my work on the floor. They kept walking around it, so now I have it on the ottoman.
It's a respect thing too, because they know how much time you put into it, and it is a bit of a respect thing. But I agree, the word rug is what throws rug hooking, because I think people are thinking, I don't have it in me to do a project the size of a rug, number one, and number two, if I love it, how many rugs does one need? It's problematic no matter how you put it towards someone. So I don't know.
Ironically, after finishing this book and so many of the projects were smaller, the last two projects I've been working on are floor-size rugs. So
really,
I think I needed the shift.
Yeah. You did so well. You did such a remarkable amount of pieces for this book in a short time. It was really incredible. Now, I recognize this piece. We saw this not that long ago. We were looking at one of our coffee nights or cocktail nights, gallery, something like that. But this was was this one of the National Punch Needle Day designs or no?
No, it was on one of the covers for punch needle rug hooking, and I taught that at Sauter.
Yes.
So it's a punch needle pillow.
Yep. We were certainly talking about this piece because this is, at this point, an iconic piece. I mean, this is very recognizable. And when it came up, I was sure that it was yours, and a ton of people in the thread also knew that it was yours. So it just goes to show that as your work evolves, you are really carving your own style into the craft, and it becomes very recognizable as your design, which is ideal. That's exactly what you want. That's another beautiful piece. I'm just going to flip through. I want to look. Do you have that one on your lap too?
I don't.
That's okay. I don't want to miss anything have I missed anything that's on your lap?
No.
Okay, good. I don't want to, because I want to see everything close up that you have. And you're showing in the chapters technical things that we need to know. The technical text is kind of sprinkled in throughout the chapter. So we talk about all things punch needle in the punch needle chapter, all things hooking in the hooking chapter, and it brings us back to small conversations and tips about that specific technique or medium in each chapter, which makes a lot of sense. So you get into conversations that are real helpful about frames and grippers, how to thread your punch needle, practical things, punch 101, trimming the tails, practical things that everybody needs to know. This is beautiful.
So that's the punch one. Yeah.
And that one's here too, right? All the different you're getting this, right? The viewers at home, all the different techniques, that's all punched.
Yeah, and this one, it's just I'm using the 8 and the 10.
Mm-hmm.
So I very little. I didn't do any reverse punching in this. I just used 2 different needle heights.
Yeah.
So I wanted each piece that represented the technique. I didn't want to go too crazy with the sort of alternative techniques within. That's what this guy.
Yeah.
It's like, you know how to hook, now let's take it to another level.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. That makes and you talk about spacing out the stitches, yarn amounts, yarn colors. You talk about so many very practical things here. It's really is a great book. Really great book. Getting started on the harmony punch pattern. Your text is just beautiful. And then you have a section of common questions that I think are really helpful. Questions like, how do the stitches stay in place? People say that all the time. Why don't the stitches fall out?
Well, and I think with all of this, they're relatively simple techniques, but there's so many nuances to them.
Yeah.
And there's even psychology to it. Like with punch versus hooking, the sort of messy phase that you go through with punch needle that you don't with traditional rug hooking can really throw some people. So I always like to address that.
I agree. You know, it's so nice when people ask, it's so nice that you put these questions here, because there are always people in class who do ask questions, but you know most people do not ask questions because they're so worried that theirs is the stupid question and that everyone else is going to think it's the stupid question. But then you get people who ask 45 questions and they're really all borderline stupid. I'm just kidding. But you've got a lot of common questions, which is really, really helpful. So if you don't want to ask things out loud in class, there's a lot here that make a lot of sense. Why are my loops uneven? Help, I keep counting holes. It's supposed to be relaxing and easy. That is a good one. That's a good one. Because people do get really tripped up, I think, by the technical aspect of either hooking or punching. So it's good to talk about it in a light, kind of comic way, and to just remind people that it really is supposed to be fun. Why are we here?
I tried to write this in a way that how I teach.
Yeah.
So my goal was it would be as if I was sitting next to you, teaching you. So I wrote in a conversational style. I addressed some of the insecurities and concerns, and so.
Yeah, I think that's the way. I mean, that's the difference between books that we're seeing now and books from years ago, like the last generation. It's like an interchangeable voice or narrator as you read a book. And I think one of, to your point, like you didn't want to write a book that Simone had already written, because that makes no sense. But at the same time, voice is very important in a book, right? And sometimes the content, even with like a novel, the content, it can be a great story. And you think, oh, there's no way I'm not going to love this book. But somehow the voice of it backs you up and you just don't like, even if it's not, dialogue, even if it's just the voice of the narration, because even narration has a voice. Sometimes it gets on your nerves and you can't finish the book because of something so small as that. So it does make a big difference, I think, when a book is approached in a way that is friendly and informal and conversational, because it will put you right off if it's too dry. And I think that was the kiss of death of like the last generation of rug hooking books, was they were so super dry. And
I think they were probably bound by certain literary rules. And in fact, I felt I was, like, my children joke that when I text them, I just use the word can't, but I rarely write in contractions and I don't speak in them that often. And so even in my texts, and so there was even sometimes where the editor made contractions where I didn't have them. And I'm like, that's not the way I speak.
Yeah.
So, but I think in previous times, in fact, when I started, I was thinking, well, a lot of this is technical writing. I'm writing about a specific technique, so I shouldn't address the reader. I was thinking about pronouns and like the invisible voice. And then finally I was like, no, I have to write as if, just like I teach. And so then the book really flowed when I just started using my voice.
Yeah. It's funny. It's like the pendulum swings, because it seems like in past generations, in terms of writing, the sort of height of sophistication, right? The highest kind of style of writing was like absolutely perfect, flawless technical writing. And you would demonstrate your prowess as a writer by writing at this very high level of, the perfection of the English language. But now it's almost like in recent years, people who are writing books, particularly nonfiction books, right, really fight to put one's own voice into the book. It's the opposite. We've been trying to get further and further away from that really dry narration and kind of fighting and even pushing a little bit with editors and presses to try to talk in a way that represents you, your brand, right? Because are people going to want to sign up for a class with you if they come to Colorado, if they think that you're all stodgy and, stuck up and, it's not so appealing. It's important to be able to be yourself. And it's hard to do that in a book. But you've done it beautifully. The writing is absolutely beautiful. I mean, it is both very literate and it is easygoing. You struck that balance beautifully. It really is gorgeous. So this is the bee sampler. We saw a glimpse of the bee sampler in this beautiful pattern here.
Yeah, and so that is taking your basic punch needle skills, and then just like in the previous chapter with the hooking, it's then taking it to another level with doing more creative stitches and embroidery like stitches, not something necessarily that would work well on a rug, but would work well on a fiber art piece.
Yeah.
And in fact, so I probably should have pulled this piece down. But so I took this piece, the bee piece, and then I have this piece, and I combined them into one.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going to be teaching at the ATHA convention in Texas next year.
Excellent. I'm glad you brought that up. What town is that?
Grapevine.
Okay, Grapevine.
So it's right by the Dallas-Fort Worth airport.
Okay. Ryan, is that near you? I think that is near you, Ryan, isn't it? No, it's great that you say that because it's neither of those patterns, but it's a pattern that has the
two of them together.
Okay.
The bee is in the center, and then the hive is going around it, but it's all monochromatic.
Fantastic.
So
that's fantastic. Yeah, it's like one. What do you call these things in the hive? What, like a single cell? Is
like
it
the cell, like the honeycomb.
Honeycomb. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. There's it's a single, and then the character. So it's a great. It's got a geometric backbone, but it's very pretty and figural. People are loving bees right now too, right? Save the bee and all that. But this is a beautiful. I don't know what that pattern is going to look like, but I know you're going to hit it out of the park. The bee is followed immediately by a kind of guide that I've never seen this in a rug hooking book to date. I've seen things like this in needlepoint books, but not rug hooking books. This is really brilliant and helpful. A guide to stitches.
Yes.
Right? Really helpful.
I love playing around with the stitches, and there's not that much that you need to add. You're stretching it out, or you're holding onto it as you punch it. You're sculpting it, you're not sculpting it, and you get all these different looks from the same needle and relatively same stitch. So it just fascinates me.
I mean, it's so good. It's so good. Even this first one is simple, but you can tell it's two different heights. Right?
Yeah, it's using the
back
stitch and the front stitch. That's it.
And you do stuff like this with your punch.
Yes,
you just jump
on a decorative level. That would not work on a rug.
Right.
But that's how I did for the bee. Yeah. Not know my bee anatomical parts. The
antennae? No.
Right underneath his head.
Oh yeah.
So I'm jumping.
Yeah. I don't know that part either.
It's a quite wide stitch.
Okay. See that kind of that world of stitches is not in my wheelhouse at all. The only thing I know about is when I look at your work, and it's so interesting because I always understood you never jump, but yet you do jump and you get these great effects. Well, like you're saying, not with a rug.
Yeah, and that's where it's each chapter is teaching the basics and the fundamentals, and then basically right after that, I'm teaching how to break all the rules I just taught.
Yeah. I mean, that's how you unraveling it or sort of devolving it is how. what we were saying earlier, right? When someone says something or teaches you something, you need to have the confidence to back it up quite a bit and say, wait a minute, is that the only way? Right. And it's not until you do that, then you start doing new groundbreaking things, or at least groundbreaking for yourself, right? As you figure out new techniques and learn.
Oh, and I think it attracts different people. There's a lot of people that never want to make a rug. They only want to work on small pieces. Well, if you're working on small pieces, you're going to be more attracted to some of these creative stitches and alternative ways to use the needle, just for variety.
Yeah, you do have more freedom if you're making smaller pieces, because you know you're not going to trod on it and pull pieces up. Yeah, absolutely beautiful. This is a gorgeous piece, Choose Joy. That looks like a larger piece.
That is. So that's a 2x3, and it hangs on the wall. And that's Long's Peak and Mount Meeker, and I live in Longmont, and we have our name because of that mountain. So that's about a half mile from my house. There's a lake, and I took a photo.
Oh, that is so beautiful. That is so beautiful. That's a very different style for you too. And it's very pattern driven, this piece with your cattails under here.
I'm breaking the border.
Yes, you are still breaking the border.
And that's still one of my earliest pieces. That was my
really?
certification piece for the Oxford certification.
Oh wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that is really different. That is just beautiful.
Yeah, I tend not to do realistic landscapes, but even then I didn't make it totally realistic,
No, it's very graphic. I always say it on the show, and I maintain, I feel like working in a graphic style is, I will argue, more creative, because doing something realistic, you are literally just trying to get like exactly the right shade or the right shape or the right tone, and you are trying to recreate something that you usually are using a reference for. But when you work in a more graphic style, you're making really sort of fly by the seat of the pants decisions about color and change, and you're making substitutions. You're making decisions that you don't have to make if you're making something that is 100% realistic. And obviously they are both beautiful, and we're talking about apples and oranges. But I love seeing work that's done in a graphic style. I think it's the height of creativity. And the next chapter, Standing Wool, is this your favorite chapter?
Yes.
Okay. This is a very good chapter.
Yeah, and I have those. So those are tops of jars.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That is so perfect for this time of year.
Yeah. There's just so much you can do with these. I mean, it could be a brooch.
Yeah.
But think of the gift giving.
Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely brilliant.
And this is supposed to be in my daughter's dorm room, but
Poor Caroline.
Because I thought, she could put cotton balls in this.
Yeah, it's great for makeup or Q-tips or whatever. Yeah. I mean, these are just absolutely brilliant. I mean, for this time of year, gift giving and stuff like that, this is something anybody can use.
And I don't know if this is sort of a brain personality thing, but only the exception is when I spin. When I spin, I just spin to spin, but that's the only time that ever happens. When I sit down and make something, I have to have the end goal in mind. Yeah. I have to be envisioning her dorm room as I make something. I don't just sort of make to make. So Standing Wool, it just lends itself so well to that, because it's so great for tangible objects.
It's so pretty and tactile, and she loves ballet. It has like that kind of ballet feel to it. It's very fluty and pretty. And is something like that worked on a foundation? Have you got like one piece of felt or wool down as a basis? Yeah.
Well, there is a piece of wool glued down, but then I sewed or glued the different elements and then glued them down.
Yeah, it's like an assemblage art piece, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that is so cute. And you choose the colors and all of that, but is it almost like you're a gardener and you create a blueprint before you get going, or are you just kind of experimenting with motifs that you've already done?
Well, this again, I wanted to try different flowers, and like on this one, I've only done this flower once.
Oh, that's such a beauty.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
Getting the amount right and then pleating it and sewing it down. So that one only happened once.
Yeah.
But then others, sort of became my favorites. And then this is a class I taught locally in Longmont. And what I love about teaching is every single time I'm going to learn something from my students. And I had students, we were using pins that had pearl heads on them to hold the quilly before we sewed them.
Yeah.
And then one student put the pin, kept it inside the flower. And then another one has sewed beads and like stuff I hadn't thought of.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I love that.
Oh, that is so good. That is such a great project. And that is, it's a good small project too. You know, because
Yeah.
some people, they've made everything and they have everything, right? And they're all done. And it's like they like the craft, they like wool, they like the way it feels, but they're kind of run out of projects to do and places to put stuff. Stuff like this, you come up with a lot of projects that make a lot of sense that are not stuff that you see every day at all. That's an understatement. And you're working a lot. Quilly is a form of standing wool, but you're showing as the chapter goes on examples of Quilly, and these are absolutely beautiful opposite examples, light to dark and dark to light.
And it's the same strip.
Oh, is it?
One way versus the other.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Those are just beautiful.
I love experimenting to see how color changes things.
Yeah. That's almost like an optical illusion. That's incredible. Because it looks like there's so much more blue when it's on the inside, but that's because when it's on the outside, the perimeter is much larger, right? It takes up less space because it's so far away from the center. And you've got this beautiful heart project happening here.
Yeah, I one that's not one of my projects. That's
that's right. It's Jeannie Vereen.
Yep.
Is she one of your buddies in that area?
I have not. She's one of the ones I have not met in person.
Oh, that's a great piece.
Well, in this day and age, I've taught her online, so I've seen her via a screen.
Yeah.
So,
but yeah. 2020. That's absolutely beautiful. It reminds me of a box of candies.
Yeah.
It's a great.
Standing wool can be a nice gateway fiber art. So you might have someone who's not too interested in hooking. Yeah. But they'll want to curl up some wool strips and glue them onto something.
Yeah,
and
they do.
Next thing you know, you might have them hooking.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think a gateway is a perfect way to put it. There are so many things that you can do with standing wool that we're seeing in Rebecca's book. But what you can't really do is pictures, right? Unless we're talking about a really large scale piece.
Right.
But for normal sized, human sized pieces, you can't really do pictures, but you can do great abstract. Oh wow, and that's that piece, isn't it?
And I was envisioning it as a jar lid. Okay. And then I just never got around to putting it on a jar.
See, to me, that is an incredible pin. I mean, that
would be a cool pin.
That would be the ultimate. That makes a lot of sense to me as a pin. And
it's a great way to use up leftovers.
Yeah. Oh, that is so good. Ooh, that is so good. Yeah, pleating, shearing, standing wool, lots of techniques, great illustrations. And then we see harmony, the pattern harmony in standing wool. So,
and that was my favorite to do.
Was this your favorite?
Yeah. I just had the best time.
Let's see it again. Let's see all the different techniques on there. So
guide me.
Yeah. Oh, so we're seeing the center, a little bit down. Yeah, we're seeing the center of it with the quilly. That's like this, the little nucleus of it. And then the 3 petals around. I hope that everybody is noticing the border is done in a collection of quillies.
Yeah, right? The border is my favorite.
Yeah, that is really something.
Yeah, and it's all different olives, and it just blends.
It blends so beautifully, but also the leaf is a great technique too.
Yeah, that's challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't do a lot of pleating because it's harder.
Yeah.
But it worked really well for this.
Did you find that you were trimming it after it was in place?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I created a rectangle and then sewed a lot of stabilizing lines and then cut it into the leaf shape.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess there's not a lot of times that I am a huge advocate for expensive scissors, but when you're doing stuff like that, having sharp, expensive scissors is a nice thing.
The applique scissors.
Yeah.
I really like using those.
Yeah. That's a beautiful piece. I mean, I can't say enough about the whole piece is beautiful, but I can't say enough about that border. The border is just incredible. Now, is the center of that piece punched like the wrong side?
No, so because I was committed to that it would only be the technique.
Yeah.
So if the center is yarn, it's a very chunky yarn that wouldn't fit in my punch needle.
Okay. Yeah.
And I just laid it down and sewed it down. I kind of made that up.
You did a great job. That fill is incredible. That's absolutely incredible. I just love the way that looks. I hope that you all saw that. It's
They're
very
basically
different. Yes.
standing yarn. It's just yarn.
Yeah, it's standing yarn. We always talk about standing wool, but this is standing yarn.
Yep.
Oh no, ladybug's on the move. Oh, sad. All right. I hate it when the bugs get in winter and they are so desperate to be warm, and oh my word. And then we move on. The illustrations, Rebecca, are amazing. I mean, you've done some absolutely beautiful photography. So this is what you were just talking about. These are some kind of ideas, right, of how you're doing some of the techniques.
Right.
Right. We're seeing the sort of fringe, right? The way
Yep. So it's just a folded over strip that I've done a little running stitch to stabilize it, and then I cut it, and then I just twirl it like a quilly, and then that's how you do these guys.
Yeah, that is just gorgeous.
But I twirled it kind of like an oval.
Yeah, that's just beautiful. And then the guy below is the other flower that's in that composition.
Yeah.
And then this is what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
That's not for the weak of heart. But
no,
this is manageable. It's just something to practice, right? It's fiddly. The fiddly factor is high, but it yields a great gift. It absolutely is beautiful when it comes out. And yeah, all beautiful things and special things are worth the time and the effort to learn. But that's another really stunning sort of tutorial section. And the Quilly coaster projects. Now these are fantastic. So this is a collection of the Quilly coasters.
And I'm pretty sure Bridget was in my Quilly coaster class.
Were you there, Bridget? I bet she was. Yeah. I mean, this is fantastic for this time of year, for gift giving, for, this is like, these are projects that, how could it not be to everybody's taste, right? Who doesn't need a Quilly coaster, honestly? Barbarians. Only barbarians don't need Quilly coasters. Everyone else needs a Quilly coaster. I mean, it's just a nice gift to give. And your how-to stuff is, I'm not going to show it too close up because I know you all are getting this book. Absolutely thorough, really, really, really very clear. Very, very clear. Perfect amount of information. And then at the end of the chapter, like you were saying earlier, Amy Reeder and her totally unique style of working with the exposed stitches and embellishments, just crazy. It's very, very different. This was a great piece of yours. I don't think I saw this piece, the fish.
Yes.
With the quilly on the front.
And when I mentioned, what if it was wood? That was an example. I found that fish at a craft store, and where the quills are was a metal kind of cutout for the fish. And you can actually kind of see the metal shining through, because ultimately it's best to put a piece of wool down so you don't see the background at all.
Yeah.
I was rushing.
I can't see it. But you can always paint something like that. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, and so those are just glued down. I mean, usually glue and wool are not friends, but for little craft projects, and I just created a bunch of pulleys and covered the metal part of the fish, and
that's absolutely brilliant. Decorative item embellishing. That's absolutely brilliant. That is gorgeous. And
it's like how I cook. You take a rotisserie chicken, and then you add a few things, and then you've made something. So here was some other sort of art piece that I then added my rotisserie chicken to.
Absolutely. It's like there's a word for that.
It's like semi-homemade or partial homemade cooking,
it's like
or something.
Partly collage, right? Because you're using different mixed media collage. Yeah. Pulling different pieces from other places. I think that's so smart. And with something like that, just an idea, you could do a class where you have somebody laser cut like a fish like this in wood, right? Or anything that you can think of. Your next big pattern idea would be great to do something like that, because a lot of people need a vehicle or need a vision and say, oh, I like Quilly, but I do like it when something's a picture. So how could that ever work for me with Quilly? Well, it can work if you're using something as a base, for example, that is part collage. It's a metal fish, right? So it's basically a mixed media project. And then you love your Quilly, you add your Quilly, and you've got a proper art piece to hang on the wall. It makes a lot of sense. It's really, really very clever. In the next chapter, you move to Proddy, Proggy, Clippy, Rag. So all of the terms that we use all around the world for pushing strips through backing and making these
Yes.
beautiful, beautiful surfaces.
And when my mother saw the book, she's like, "What? There's feet. Why are there feet?" And it's very contemporary to have, feet or
Yeah.
hands in pictures.
It gives you an idea of scale too.
Yes.
It gives you an idea of scale. Yeah, the feet are not offensive. They're not. They're not like they're exposed bunion feet with yellow toenails. It's
She didn't know what to
totally
do.
tasteful. Yeah, and then you're showing great illustrations of actually using a Proddy tool, and you are using the poking in tool
Yes.
on one page, and then on in the next section you are using the pulling up spring tool.
Yes. For this one, I used the prodder.
Yeah,
So I worked it from the back,
yeah,
and then I might have hooked a few of the elements, but I primarily worked the whole thing from the back on this
Yeah.
one.
yeah. That is so pretty. Let me look at that one again. Which one was that? Is that one of the ones on the cover? No, that's not one on
No,
the
that
cover.
one, yeah.
All right, that's still a good one. Let me see if I can find that. Can you hold that one up one more time?
Yeah, it's on page 75. It's big.
What is it on 75?
75.
Okay, I'll find it. Yeah, I mean that's a gorgeous piece. That's a gorgeous piece. We were talking about that one earlier. I just want to
Yeah.
look at it again in the context of the chapter. It's very clever. Oh, you're using this tool. You're using
Yes,
the wooden tool.
I love that tool.
Oh, how fun is that?
And
That
that's
is clever.
once I started playing around with that, that's when I was like, oh, I'm so making a bathroom rug, and I'm going to use that tool.
Yeah.
I got it from Searsport, I think.
Okay. Yeah, there. I mean, it's available in the it's available more in the UK, but if Searsport's carrying it, that's a little bit easier.
Yeah, because on Etsy you can find them, but they're all shipping.
The shipping is big.
Yeah.
Yeah, it must be fairly recent that Searsport, because last time I looked, it wasn't that long ago. Searsport didn't have this, and it was from the UK, because of course the British are much more into the rag rugs than we are historically. So they have created some incredible tools over the years. Elspeth Jackson, and you're showing one of her pictures too, has an important British website, and she manufactures a lot of the tools as well for people who are not watching from the U.S. Now,
and then those are her feet.
oh, those are her feet. Okay, well, they are very glamorous feet. I should have
You might keep her
known.
mother's, because it's her mother's rug. It's Victoria Jackson's rug.
Oh, right. God, that's just it's a gorgeous photo. It's a very nummy photo.
Yeah.
Lots of
You can just
texture and color.
sense how wonderful it would be to walk on that rug.
Yeah. I mean, it really is. It is for people who love fiber. That is just it's a dream kind of a photo. You can get lost in this photo. Absolutely beautiful. Yeah, it's good to see the different techniques for doing Proddy from the front and from the back. And then you have a conversation about cutting the shaped pieces for Proddy. Now, are you using the die cut trays, or are you doing most of them from templates, stencils, or by hand?
So this one, I drew everything myself, and because these are quite large, these petals.
Yeah.
And then and I use that cutter tool.
Yeah.
But then for the project in the book, it's a brooch. I did use the dies. So
Yeah, and the thing about the dies, so here's the project. The thing about the dies is that's it, right?
yes.
All right, I'm getting.
But what's fun is you can have one shape that you cut out, but then you can alter that shape.
Yeah, and I bet everybody's comes out a little bit different. It is good to have the confidence, because of course Old Tattered Flag does make the die tray. I think everybody knows that, but it's $120, right? Just the tray. It is good to have the confidence and the sort of wherewithal to say, I want a piece that looks like this when it comes up, and this is the size that I want it as well. Because when you're using the die trays, you do get beautiful, perfect pieces every time, and they are beautiful and perfect.
Yeah.
But if you want to control the size, or if you want to do some of these pieces that Rebecca is doing in the book, is that with the die tray, that one? Are they all the same?
This is a good example of that, where these get progressively larger.
Okay.
So
I see.
you wouldn't be able to use, maybe you could use one of the dies, but then you'd have to create your own pattern to make it smaller and smaller.
Yep. Yep. That is, I'm so happy that you pointed that out. It really is a thing. It's all about confidence, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just about confidence and saying, well, if this works, then if I put it on a piece of paper that that's going to work that way too. And I like how you take little nicks out of some pieces too to give it a completely different shape. You know, if you're trying to model flowers or leaves after specific flowers or leaves, it is good to be able to, again, have the confidence to say, well, what makes this different is the shape, right? So and I think sometimes, would you say sometimes it makes sense to cut your pieces and trim the pieces into fine detail after you pull them through? Yeah.
It depends on how thick your wool is.
Yeah.
Because you can really shred it pulling it through.
Yeah.
So some of that fine work needs to be done after.
Yeah, I think it's all, and I think there's something to be said for doing your own shapes, just because if you do it a little larger than you mean, when you pull it through, it's like it's being born through the backing. And, not to be disgusting, but it takes a bad beating. And it is good to be able to trim it, but to not diminish the size of it in trimming it. That's always a thing, isn't it? You have some beautiful other projects in here. Another buddy, maybe Chris Hornby, this seasonal piece that's really lovely. Lots of great examples. This is the Mira that Rebecca was just showing us that goes in terms of scale from the very small leaf shape to the much larger. That is such a lush, gorgeous piece. That has such a great sort of boho feel to it. What a fun piece that is. I like how you whipped the center too. It's very, very tidy. And then we're seeing examples of other people's work. A beautiful rabbit piece by Scylla Cameron, Prodded. Beautiful examples, again, carrying on that trend of really having selected very, very good examples for the points that you're making in each chapter. Now, when we get to the end, chapter 5 is one of those chapters that might bear further explanation, finding harmony in rug hooking.
Yes. So that's where we move into, all right, we've spent the majority of the book exploring the 4 techniques. Now let's bring it together.
Yeah.
So that's where the harmony piece. So with this one, I looked at the pattern and I thought, all right, if I had approached this pattern from day one with the knowledge from the book, I would look at it and I'd say, I love those back stitches of the punch needle, and they make such a neat frame. Yeah. So I want those. I have all these small strips. I'm gonna hook those high and sculpt them. But I'm gonna do some shading. And Quilly's just make the best centers of flowers.
They really do.
Again, I didn't want it to look like, how many techniques can I put in one little piece?
Yeah.
And I sort of let the piece tell me what it should be.
Yeah. What other things do you like doing besides spinning and all the rug making crafts?
I've been dabbling with some watercolor, but primarily I've always stuck with the fiber arts. And even though I've been doing all this spinning, I don't know how to knit. I barely crochet, and I have hooked with some of my hand spun, but I just find that very soothing. So one of these days I'll figure out what to do with all this sort of lumpy yarn I'm making. But
because when you look at Rebecca's book, you're going to get such a feel for her personality, and here too certainly get a good feel for her personality. You have, there's something about you, the detail of the things that you like. It reminds me, I hope it's okay if I say it, that you and your daughter have done a lot of dollhouse stuff too, like making small
miniatures.
It makes sense.
I'm fascinated by small things.
Yeah.
And making things to scale and
And you've done, some of the projects that you've described to me in the past, like small projects that you've made that are dollhousey, and projects that you've done with her.
I even made a little punch needle to scale for an American Girl doll.
Yeah.
And then we had a scene, one of my friends made a rug, and then she found this little tiny rug beater. So we had like the doll wearing an apron and beating the little hooked rug.
It's perfect. It's perfect, but it's so you. Everything that you say, everything that you wear, everything that you write, everything that you make, it all fits together. That you have style. You have great style. It all makes sense. I love hearing about other things that you like doing because it fits in and it all makes sense. This is another beautiful piece. I've seen this piece too. This pillow design is really
Yes.
gorgeous. That's very different again. That has, a bit of a stained glass mid-century look. I think with this piece, the color palette is just out of the park hit.
And,
it
that
clears
was
the
just
bases.
leftovers.
Mm.
And so that all the colors were working together from another project. And I just drew some shapes and repeated them. And I hooked all the wool strips, and then I punched the background with yarn.
Yeah.
It was a very
Yeah.
simple project, but I like the impact.
It's, it is simple, but simple is hard. You're using double lines in some places and single lines in other places. It's not a formula. And it's a little bit, for me, looking at it, it's a little bit outside of what you normally do. This is like quite loose. I mean, it still has a very geometric structural feel to it. But I can picture you doing this. And I have to say, I can picture you agonizing at certain points and going, do I want a yellow like that?
Right.
Now, I have to ask, how much do you, when you work, how much do you pull out as you go?
It depends on the project. So the flower you showed,
Yeah.
the punch needle one that you said is quintessentially me.
Yes.
When I designed that, I changed maybe one color in one spot. I mean, it just flowed. That's the only time that's ever happened. Pretty much every time I'm changing my mind.
Yeah.
Unless, well, like with that pillow, since I was using leftovers from another project where I'd already color planned it, I knew all those colors would work together. So, but the last piece I just did, I changed my mind so much in one section because I'll pick an area, and I mentioned this in the book, I'll pick an area where a lot of the design elements come together.
Yeah.
And I hope to punch a little bit of everything to test my colors. So on this rug I just finished, I was doing that, and I could not come up with the background. It was the first time ever that I used the monk's cloth, because maybe 7 different times. I hooked it, I punched it, I punched it again. So
frustrating.
To me, you know how like when you sew, you're inevitably gonna sew something inside out. The seam ripper is part of sewing.
100%. Yep.
I view changing your mind on color. It's not that you don't know how to color plan or that there's something wrong with you. To me, it's part of the creative process.
Yeah.
I change my mind.
Yeah.
It evolves.
You seem like more like, because there's two. I think there's 2 kinds of people. There might be more, and I think in this way we differ in the way that we work. I'm way more the kind of person who, if I find a bunch of colors that I like, or I happen to put a bunch of colors on the table that I like, and I think, oh God, I love these colors. They all have to go in my next piece. They will go in my next piece, whether it looks right or not. Even if they're in there and I can look at it and I can say, I have to admit the contrast is not very good here. Like, this is not very, the colors are not doing the piece any favors, and I will still leave them in there because that's the way I am. Whereas I think you work in a more sensible way where you put piece and you understand as an artist that as soon as you put the next color next to it, it doesn't look like that color anymore. You have to be prepared for that, and you have to make good decisions,
Yeah. Fiber absorbs light so much more than if we were drawing or painting. And I still struggle with that. I'll bundle all my colors together. I think they look okay, but then on a larger scale, they don't.
Yeah.
And maybe part of it is I have choice, so I can change my mind. So that might be part of it.
Yeah. And you're also trained. I mean, you're highly trained. You did the certification for Amy Oxford, and then you did the McGowan certification, right? So you are further. I think you're already a very technical person, but you're further sort of, I don't want to say programmed. That's not the right word. But I think you run a filter through your brain or a dialogue to say, does this look good next to this? And I think that's why you're well known for color. You're well known for your wool. You're well known for patterns where the colors are really striking. Would you say that this is your favorite color palette?
I tend to use that red a lot.
Yeah, you do use that.
Every piece has a form of red that can sometimes go a little more pink all the way to a rust. But yeah, I'm looking around and red shows up in almost everything.
Yeah, you do really well with reds and pinks, I have to say. You do really well with brown too, because I always say on the show, brown for me is one of my least favorite colors because it reminds me of that 50s, 60s era of rug making. But when you use brown, I don't have that association at all. It's like
It's
somehow
neat.
it's lifting the colors.
I picked brown because I was really wanting to hone in on the idea of a frame.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah,
brown.
I see, like an actual wooden frame.
Yeah.
No, I mean it's the perfect color. It's not a typical brown. It's not a 70s brown. It's like it's got a lot of yellow to it. It's very light. It's absolutely beautiful. Yeah, your colors are not like anybody else's colors, and that's a feat. Because we see a lot of work, with the internet, with all the Facebook groups now, we see a lot of work. Your stuff doesn't look like anybody's work. And your owl, I remember this piece. That is such a great piece. Oh,
Yeah, that one's really special to me.
oh God, that one is just fabulous. And here you've got tips for combining punching and hooking. And
Yes,
this
so
is
that's
really
how
useful.
I start out. That section is all right. Let's take the two simplest to combine, which is punching and hooking, and then we move into Proddy, Proddy and standing wool, and then it wraps up with taking it even further.
That's a clever evolution. I'm
Now,
seeing
is Karen on the call? Karen Darby?
Yeah, I was just coming up to her thing and wondering, Karen, she normally says if she's there, she might not be. It is a holiday weekend in the U.S. For those of you who are not in the U.S., we are coming off our Thanksgiving weekend this week, so it is a little bit of a different weekend. I was looking at Karen's piece, and I'm not sure. I've seen this piece. I know she's been going to town with Proddy lately,
Yeah.
and I missed this piece somehow, but it's absolutely beautiful.
And I was really, originally there was supposed to be more than one piece of her work, but there was some trimming.
Yeah, that happens with the book editing process, and there's not a lot that as an author you can do about that.
Yeah. So I was very glad that this piece.
Absolutely. Well, luckily there's more books. I'm sure there's always more books. This is another beautiful piece.
Yeah, Mary's.
Yep,
piece,
Mary's piece is gorgeous.
She's a very special friend.
Yeah. I love that you know the people whose work is in this book, and it's not just like a grabbing at resources. These are people who you've taught and people that you know, and just great examples. And combining hooking, punch, and Proddy, so you're getting not just tips on how to do each technique, right? You're getting tips on that very, very fine, that gray area that is how and when do you combine these things. Right, that is the thing. And you explain it as it's such an abstract conversation, but you explain it as well as it can be put into words, without a doubt. So that if people are thinking, well, I do like all of this thing, but all of these different techniques, but how would I ever combine that into a piece? Well, there's a whole section of the book that's devoted to that conversation.
Well, and the piece with the bee that's on the other page.
Yeah.
So.
This bee.
That one?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's an example of I didn't set out to let me combine punching and standing wool. I had that frame. It's a shelf. I already had the bee. It was actually a small pillow that was just really too small to be a pillow. And it didn't fit in the recessed area of the shelf that I got from the thrift store. And so Quilly is where the solution to fill that recessed area. So it solved a problem.
Ooh. Oh, that was a very good solution. See, you do so well with the color gray.
I like to, I'm wearing gray. I love gray.
You do really well. Because gray is a neutral, but it pops everything around it. Gray is the most understated neutral. People always go for black or white in backgrounds, and I think we don't see enough gray. We just don't see enough gray. But you've got a lot of pieces that have a bit of a multimedia feel to them.
Yes.
And that is super exciting. This is an exciting section right here.
Yes.
Some different ideas. Now, are those the tiny frames, the little embroidery hoops? Oh, I love those. Those are fun.
Midnight Creative, Katie Stackhouse.
Oh, yeah.
I don't see a caption on that guy.
No. Well, you just said it, so that helps. But those are some great little projects.
Oh, good. It does. At least it's in the text.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's one of my fiber friends that we've actually never met in person, but I would often be working on something, and then I would look at her Instagram, and she'd be working on like almost identical thing. Like we have the same aesthetic and interests, and so it's yeah, I
That's
really
funny.
do.
Yeah, those are beautiful too. Again, beautiful examples. You made some really good choices. Really good choices. And then combining hooking. So there are several sections on just like insets, combining hooking, punch, and standing wool.
Yeah.
Yeah, with lots of ideas, lots of original ideas about even like steaming and how to make stuff fit. What is the perfect fit? It's all very practical information and more great examples from other artists of pieces that include more than one medium. Now, this is your first Burnham Flowers. This is kind of, we're getting to the end of the book, and we're seeing the first,
That
the
was the
original.
Yeah, and I like it, but
Yeah.
it's not me.
No, it's
That
not
one's me.
you.
Yeah,
That one's way more you. This
yeah,
makes the point that you've been making throughout the book. Yeah, the second one is you. You figured out how to do exactly the same pattern, but to give it a special twist that is uniquely your own voice and your own brand.
Yeah, I hope to give people confidence to take a pattern that maybe they look at it and go, "Ah, it's not really my style," and then think, well, wait, if I just change this, and it's totally okay, unless someone has told you, hey, you can change someone else's pattern, they're not going to care. In fact, they will probably be really thrilled to see your interpretation of it.
Yeah.
Move that leaf over, delete it, change it, the flower. It all of a sudden it opens up so many different possibilities.
Yeah. No, that's a great conversation to have. That's an infinite conversation to have too. That's just one of my favorites because it gives everybody carte blanche to just try some different things. And your last chapter, chapter 6, next level harmony.
Well, when I started writing, and it was actually, was it you, Deanna? I can't remember who I was talking to. Oh, I think it was Mary who did the one with the fish.
Yeah.
But I quickly realized, okay, this is my wheelhouse. This is my stuff that I like to do and combine. Yeah. But there's all these people they're adding braiding and beading and they're painting the background, stuff I haven't even thought of yet.
Yeah.
And so pretty early on, I realized I need the final chapter to be, okay, so we've started this conversation about combining things, run with it.
Yeah.
What else? Let's paint. Like there's a piece where the rugwork has been painted. There's wool that's been painted.
I see. Yep, this is the rugwork's been painted.
Yep. The beading, it just fascinates me. There's feathers and beads and yeah.
That is so beautiful. Yeah, the beading, I was noticing the beading. God, and to show the back of it before, that piece that is just very subtly painted, the rugwork.
Yep.
Right. That is really, it gives it a bit of an antique look, and having, rugwork is not one of the prettiest fibers, but it looks a lot prettier when you paint it like that.
Yeah.
That is really clever, and there's a lot of sewn applique on that piece. Piece like this too with Teresa Kilgore, lots of pretty bling, like a little buttons, a little sort of bakelite button.
She has an amazing collection of buttons. And what I really like about her work is she works almost exclusively with other people's patterns, and she takes them in such a different direction than the original pattern designer had thought of. And not that the original didn't have merit, but it's such a great example of, because you'll find some people who say, oh, you should always create your own pattern. I don't do that at all. There's so many incredible pattern designers out there. There's an infinite amount of actual patterns that need homes. There's no reason you could take it and then take it in a totally different direction with the materials you're using and like adding the buttons and
it's like every time you can read other people's books. You don't have to write your own book every time, right? It's the same premise, right? There's lots of other work out there that has value that's worth picking up. I just noticed that this piece also has a pretty painted background.
Yes, and that's actually a piece of wool.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
the camera does not want to focus.
Yeah, I'm not sure it'll focus. But you know how sometimes you'll get an absolutely gorgeous piece of wool and you think, I can't cut that up and hook with it?
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to use it as a background.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. There's this quilting book that I used to like when I was more of a quilter that was called Can't Cut This, like Can't Cut This.
Yeah, yeah,
And yeah, it was that idea. Like they were such pretty all over prints that you cut it, you would kind of ruin something. So same kind of premise. This is a great piece. I forgot about. This is one of your pieces.
yeah. So that's the only piece that my hand spun has ever gone into.
And
And
this
there's
is
needle felting.
Yep.
in that.
This is a beautiful, perfect for this chapter, beautiful sort of God's eye view down on a landscape. So this chapter, I don't think I said, but this chapter includes braiding, trapunto, beading, needle felting, embroidery, applique, buttons, crewel, painted foundation, used wool as a background, and drawing on wool.
Yes.
So that's a lot of techniques.
Yeah, and that's
Absolutely
something
beautiful.
I haven't done before, but I've been tempted where I've hooked something and then thought, that's a little too bright. Or I thought, well, why couldn't I don't know, just change it.
Yeah.
Or
You can always change it.
No. But you could add veins on leaves and
There's so many things you could do to add a little bit of extra. And it's kind of with the pacing of this book, you show the different techniques that we're all, we've heard of at least if we haven't tried them. And then like you're saying at the end, it's kind of the catch-all where you're saying, well, don't forget about this, and 20 other things too.
And I'm sure there's even more
Yeah.
that aren't mentioned that could be combined in our looking.
As time goes on, right, we see more and more different techniques and different materials that are non-traditional being used in the same piece. And it's just variety. It just reminds us that for every piece that we do, how could it ever get boring and old, right? There's so many there's a million choices in every piece, and then the next piece will be completely different than this piece, and you might want to try some of these other techniques with the next. I mean, it's just infinite. It's just infinite.
And it's why you need a basement. I don't have a basement in this house, and I'm running out of storage. Like I keep looking at your necklace, and I think, when you don't want to wear that as a necklace, those beads, really interesting sewn into something.
They would do a good pattern or something too. I've always loved this. Thanks for noticing. Karen Kale, hi Rebecca. I can't wait to read your next book. So I want to open it up to people who are here while we're still here, because we're definitely getting on. If anybody has any questions for Rebecca, now is a great time to ask. Pamela, I wanted to say hello to you. I noticed that you tuned in a while back. And Bridget said, indeed, she was in your Quilly class.
She's taken almost every class I've taught.
Oh, I can see why she's a great fan. You are with a great person. She knows a good thing when she sees it. So, I mean, this is just an amazing book. So I got to the end, and of course, I left a lot out. It's absolutely a beautiful book. This is a great technique book. This is a great eye candy book. It's beautifully written. I just can't say enough for this book. I think it's one of these absolutely must-have books. And I think you're very lucky that you're hearing about it now, because it's not officially out in stores. You're not going to find it out in a store yet, right? It came to book club members, and Rebecca has a bunch of these until they sell out for this moment on her Etsy, in the Etsy shop, which is called Storyteller Wool. And so if they type in Etsy Storyteller Wool, they should be able to get to the store.
Yes.
And do you have some of the yarn in there too?
Yes.
So there's other things in there, but the book is going to be easy to find, and it is called Rug Hooking in Harmony. So this would be a great thing to grab. And as we were looking at it, we found so many projects that are large scale projects, but also smaller scale projects, like the jars on the mason jar. And for this time of year, when you're looking for a smallish project, there's a lot of creative new ideas in here. We don't have conversations about things that are other than rugs often enough. There's a lot of different examples of different types of finished products in here. So it's well worth having. It's well worth consulting. And I think it's the kind of book where you're going to actually want to read it and not just flip through it. It's a great book. Gretty says, great book. You have to get it. It is great, Gretty. I can't say enough for it. I just love it. I love everything about it. I love the way that it came out. I think it's so beautiful. It's a beautiful looking book. So I know there's a delay. I'm not seeing any questions. I think we covered a lot of territory though. What would somebody ask? That's not, I'm trying to think of things because we talk all the time and I'm thinking, oh, am I missing anything that's important that I should say that's relevant to this conversation? But yeah, I think the book really speaks for itself. And it's a great finished product. It is so much work putting a book together. And you did this so well. It has such a style to it. It has such a feel to it. It's very cohesive. It's a book that makes sense. It's really, really streamlined. It's just like you. It's very pretty. It's streamlined. It's contemporary. It's clean. It's crisp. It's modern. It has a great color sense. It's just a great book. And it's just a bonus that it's filled with all of these other techniques for you, because try to find another book with this many techniques, right? This is a lot. So what a gift to the rug hooking and punch needle world that you put this out there.
Thank you. I was hoping that, someone who only knew traditional hooking might want the book because it has hooking in it, but then they might be enticed to try some of these other techniques, or someone who would never think of doing punch needle. Well, there's that chapter in there. Maybe they'll want to do it now.
I hope you're right. I'm sure you're right. Because you make a nice transition from one to the next, right? You really kind of piggyback one technique onto the next in a way that's logical. So I think that will for sure happen. So make sure that you all spread the word on Rebecca's new book. I'll hold it up one more time, and I'll remind you one more time that it's in Rebecca's Storyteller Wool Etsy store,
yes.
Etsy. And says, working on my quillies to add to my chair pad for fish bubbles. And she says, how do you sew them down to then hook around them?
Okay. So you have your quilly already sewn. Yeah. And then I place it where I want it. It's very technical. And then I tack it down. So I get it mainly tacked down. So there's no real name to the stitch. You're just kind of diving down with your needle and then coming back up through the linen. And while you're doing that, you're further making that quilly stronger. And then I like to have my quilly sew down, and then I hook around them. It's much easier to hook around a quilly than to punch, because you can see what you're doing. When you're punching on the other side. But then once you've punched or hooked around the quilly, I then go back through, and especially if the piece is going to move at all, if it's a pillow, that there's a slight flex to a pillow. And even on this piece, it's static, but often I'll take it off the wooden frame when I travel or when I'm teaching, and I didn't want it to sort of fold away and then you could see the edge of the quilly, so I'll go through and gently tack the yarn or wool strips that are hooked or punched around it to the quilly. That makes sense.
That makes sense.
I'm much more eloquent in the book. I really
no, that makes perfect sense. I want to just dwell for a second on a point you made that you said it quickly because you know it, and I just want to point it to other people out. Rebecca said, if you're putting a quilly on the surface of the thing, it's going to be easier to hook around it than to punch it, because of course if you were punching it, it would be in reverse, and then you wouldn't actually see the quilly.
And you could impale the quilly by accident. Now I have done that where I've sewn them down and then you put it up against a window, or I happen to have a light table, and you'll be able to see the quilly. And then I'll take a marker and mark where it is. And then I'll even keep my hand underneath as I'm punching and gently hold the quilly to make sure the punch needle goes right next to it and not through it. But ultimately, it's always easier to hook around the quilly than it is to punch.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And this is one of the things I learned just when I was doing it. I had a student who wanted to do a cover for her drum. She was in a drumming group.
Ooh.
And that was for those really large quillies that were photographed that went from one color to another.
Yes.
She wanted a yin yang pattern.
Yep.
And so we created those. I showed her how to sew the quilly and sew them down. And what she had done is she had actually punched and left the areas. So we created the quilly then to fit in it. But then the cover moved a little bit on the drum, and I didn't like that. So that's when I learned, I really like tacking the surrounding loops to the quilly. Further stabilizes the quilly, and it just keeps the whole piece together if there's some slight movement.
Yeah, I think that's very clear. It's a bit of a fiddly thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and sewing them down, it isn't easy. It,
No,
you
no.
know, I like to keep the piece on my frame
Yeah,
because then I can dive down, reach and grab the needle, and then come back up.
yeah, yeah. I probably do it. I do it. I come up under it and then I come through it and
Yeah.
spear it. Do you ever use a curved needle when you sew on quillies?
No, but that would work well.
I've done it a few times. It can work well. I mean, you're guaranteed to stab yourself horribly many times because it's so unaccountable. The curved needle just does its own thing and it just turns around. But it's one of these things that it's a practical thing. You just kind of have to figure out your style for sewing it, tacking it down.
And then I just saw the word. It's more like a basting stitch.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
baste it on, and then once it's finished, like with this guy, you can't see it because I use white thread.
yeah,
But once all the pulleys are on, I'll go through and this is where the curved needle would work well. And I just stabilize it. I
Yeah.
just put all kinds of stitches around the back, just
Yeah.
going up and through.
yeah. I mean, it's when like we're doing Quilly's bordering on needlework, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we're right on the edge right there, and nobody would ever look at the back of someone's needlework and have any remarks on that. You know, it's just you do what you have to do when you're holding
Yeah.
a needle.
In fact, I can only show on this because I did purposely. I have this piece held on the Velcro.
Okay.
Can you see all those random stitches?
Yeah.
So I did those in a darker color, and they're a mess.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's just trying to really secure it.
yeah. The only thing is to secure it. There's no
Yeah.
points for beauty. So I mean you have succeeded if that thing is attached and it's not coming off. There's
Yeah.
nothing else to say. But yeah, no, that is perfect. And Linda, my mom said, I was thinking how lovely a Christmas gift to give the spiral pot holder with the bowl of spiral cookies inside. Ooh, that would be nice.
Yeah.
You know what else is very nice? I'm just going to put it out there, right? Even if you have the book, it's very nice to get the book and give it to your local library, right? Because Rug Cooking Magazine is Ampre Press. This isn't an enormously large press, as we know. It's good to put the book out there in front of other people. A book like this is very, very useful, lots of different techniques. Making a donation to the local library is a big deal because it means that the amount of people who get to look at it multiplies many, many times, right? And this isn't necessarily, anything by Ampre Press isn't necessarily something that a library
Yeah.
would stock.
They don't usually show up in libraries unless someone donates them.
Exactly. And that usually is years later, when that something has maybe happened to that person, God forbid. But it is nice to, when the book is new, when the book is fresh, when other people are talking about it, it's a good time to donate the book to a library. It's a good thing to do, particularly at this time of year. And Linda said, thank you both for sharing this fabulous book and both of your points of view, feeling very encouraged and inspired. Brava. And my mom says, I was also thinking about Deanna's necklace. Great patterning idea. Thumbs up. Well, if you like the necklace, you're certainly going to like the earrings too. And Terrence says, yes, we were side by side. Good. So the feed went well, and I love working in this format. Equal side by side. Fantastic. I think it worked, Rebecca.
Yeah. Great.
I know. Murphy did not have his way tonight. We actually did a show where we were both on from different parts of the country. Valerie says, my mom did some paper quilling, rather similar, and another inspiration for standing wool. It's definitely related,
Exactly.
isn't it? Yeah, it's just the
That's
same
where the
thing.
name comes from.
Yep. Different material, but same technique.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you think about it, if you look at pictures of books with quilling, you see a lot of birds and things like that. You see a lot of like Asian subjects, right? Interesting, because I had just run my mouth and said, when you're doing quilling, you can't really do figural stuff. Well, I guess you could. If you think about all of the ways that people have done paper quilling,
That's
you often
true.
get animals and things like that,
Yeah.
and quite
It's,
busy scenes.
A great way to get design ideas for standing wool and quillies is to look up paper quilling, and see the different designs.
That's a great tip. Did you get that? That's a great tip. Great idea. Well, we are right on the money with 9 o'clock. Thank you, everybody who tuned into this episode. Rebecca, mostly thanks to you. This was a fantastic episode. Fantastic book. How could we go wrong when we were looking at this, right? How could we have a bad episode? This is an absolutely beautiful book. One more time, on Etsy, Storyteller Wool, name of the shop. This is a perfect thing to have for the holidays. Get it now before it's out. You will be ahead of the curve. Kirsten says, so fascinating. Oh, thank you both. Thank you so much for helping us with the technology on this so we could be here together. We needed lots of dry runs here. Happy weekend, everybody. Thank you again so much for tuning in. Rebecca, thank you for being here. And if they have any questions, can they reach you in any other way?
Yes. So I have a website, storytellerworld.com, and there's like a little contact form. But you can easily just email me at any point. It's Rebecca@storytellerworld.com. I love answering questions and chatting with people and especially seeing people's work.
There you go. That's your entree. So you have direct access now. So thank you so much to everybody. Thank you, Rebecca. Have a great weekend, everybody. And I will be back with you on Monday, coffee time, regular time, noon Eastern Standard Time on the Ribbon Candy Hooking channel. I will see you then. In the meantime, happy weekend, everybody.